It was a warm summer evening, when the world as David knew it began to crumble. The golden hues of the sunset bathed the small, cozy living room where he sat, cradling a photograph of his smiling girlfriend Jenna. They had been together for nearly 3 years, a whirlwind romance filled with laughter, shared dreams, and promises of forever. But forever, as David had learned just hours ago, was an illusion. Jenna had left. Her departure was abrupt and cruel, with no warning, no chance for closure. A hastily scribbled note sat on the kitchen counter, the ink smeared as though her hand had trembled while writing it. "I'm sorry, David. I can't do this anymore. I need space, and I need to figure out who I am without us." That was it. No explanation, no hint of what he had done wrong. Just an empty house and a heart heavy with confusion and pain. As David sat in the silence that night, the sound of the clock ticking felt deafening. His mind raced, replaying every moment of their relationship, searching for a sign he might have missed. But the past offered no answers, only questions that deepened the ache in his chest. It was hard to imagine life moving forward without Jenna. He had built his future around her, and now that future was gone. A few days later, as he struggled to adjust to the hollow routines of his new reality, David's world was shaken once again. This time, it wasn't heartbreak knocking on his door, but responsibility. Two tiny, unexpected responsibilities. The knock came in the early hours of the morning, a sound that jolted him from a restless sleep. He opened the door to find a social worker standing there, holding two beautiful twin baby girls, their wide brown eyes staring up at him with innocence and trust. "Mr. Carter," the social worker began, her voice professional but tinged with sympathy. "These are Layla and Maya. Jenna listed you as their father in the hospital records." David froze, his mind struggling to keep up. "I had to understand. Jenna never told me she was pregnant," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The social worker shifted uncomfortably. "It's unusual, I know, but we need you to take them in. There's no one else listed as their guardian." He stared at the twins, his heart pounding in his chest. They were so small, so fragile, with matching tufts of curly black hair and soft brown skin that glowed in the dim porch light. They didn't look anything like him, and yet there they were, his daughters, according to the paperwork in the social worker's hand. The days that followed were a blur. David had no experience with children, let alone newborns. He quickly learned that sleepless nights, endless feedings, and mountains of diapers were now his reality. His once orderly life became chaotic, filled with the cries of two tiny humans who depended on him for everything. There were moments of doubt, times when David questioned if he was capable of being a father. But there were also moments of connection, like when Layla's tiny fingers wrapped around his, or when Maya's laughter filled the room, reminding him that, despite the struggles, these girls were a part of him now. He began to pour every ounce of his energy into being the best father he could be, even as the lingering questions about their sudden arrival remained unanswered. Months turned into years, and David grew into his role as a single father. The twins thrived under his care, their personalities blossoming in ways that amazed him. Layla was adventurous and bold, always the first to climb the highest playground slide or explore a new corner of the world. Maya, on the other hand, was thoughtful and observant, her quiet nature a contrast to her sister's boundless energy. Together, they filled David's life with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since Jenna's departure. Still, there was a nagging doubt that David couldn't shake. Every time he looked in the mirror and then at his daughters, he couldn't ignore the differences. Their features didn't resemble his, and strangers often commented on it, their curiosity thinly veiled as polite conversation. "They must look like their mother," people would say, and David would nod, forcing a smile while the questions in his heart grew louder. One evening, after tucking the twins into bed, David sat alone in the quiet of his living room. He stared at a picture of Jenna he had kept, wondering if he'd ever truly known her. He thought about the social worker's visit, the unanswered questions, and the nagging feeling that something about this story didn't add up. Finally, he made a decision, one that would change everything. The next morning, he called a DNA testing service. He told himself it was just to ease his mind, to confirm what he already believed. After all, Jenna had listed him as the twins' father. But deep down, he knew this test was about more than just biology. It was about finding the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Weeks later, the results arrived. David hesitated, the envelope heavy in his hand. The twins played on the floor nearby, their laughter filling the room. He wondered how this moment might change their lives, their bond, and his understanding of everything he had come to believe. With a deep breath, he opened the envelope and scanned the page. What he saw made his heart stop. The words blurred before his eyes, but the message was clear. David wasn't the twins' biological father. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Questions flooded his mind. Questions about Jenna, the twins, and the life he had built around a lie. But as he looked over at Layla and Maya, their giggles echoing in the room, one thing was certain. No test could change the love he felt for them. Still, the truth had opened a door to a past he wasn't prepared to face. A past that held secrets he was now determined to uncover. David sat there, the DNA test results trembling in his hands. He read them over and over, hoping he had misunderstood, but the conclusion remained the same. Layla and Maya weren't his daughters, not by blood at least. His breath quickened, and his heart pounded in his chest as a storm of emotions flooded him. Confusion, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss clashed with the love he still felt for little girls playing innocently nearby, oblivious to the truth that had just shattered his world. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as questions swirled in his mind. How could Jenna have done this to him? Why had she lied? And if he wasn't their father, then who was? The answers seemed impossibly out of reach, hidden behind the layers of a past that he now realized he had only scratched the surface of. The next few days were a blur of routine and reflection. David went through the motions of caring for the twins, feeding them, dressing them, playing with them, but his mind was elsewhere. Every giggle, every tiny hug, every sleepy, "I love you, Daddy," tugged at his heart, reminding him of the bond they shared, a bond that no piece of paper could erase. Yet the weight of the truth pressed on him relentlessly, demanding answers. Late one evening, after the girls had fallen asleep, David sat alone with Jenna's note in his hands. He had read it countless times since she left, searching for clues, but now it felt like it held new significance. Her words echoed in his mind. "I need to figure out who I am without us." At the time, he had taken it as a vague attempt to justify her departure. But now he wondered if it was a confession, if she had been running from a truth too painful to share. Determined to find answers, David dug through the few keepsakes he had from their time together. A shoebox buried in the back of his closet held old photographs, birthday cards, and love notes Jenna had written him. As he sifted through them, memories came flooding back, moments of joy, laughter, and connection that now felt tainted by the revelation of her deceit. Among the mementos, he found an old journal Jenna had kept. He hesitated before opening it, unsure if he wanted to know what secrets it might reveal. But his need for understanding outweighed his fear. Flipping through the pages, he saw entries filled with her thoughts and feelings, her dreams and fears. One entry, dated shortly before she left, caught his eye. "I'm drowning in guilt. Every day, I look at David, and I want to tell him the truth, but I'm too much of a coward. He deserves better than this, better than me. The twins, they're my world, but they're not his. I don't know how much longer I can live with this lie. I just hope that one day he'll forgive me." David's hands trembled as he read the words. The confirmation he had sought was there in black and white. Jenna had known all along that the twins weren't his, yet she had let him believe they were. The betrayal cut deep, but so did the pain in her words. She had been carrying a burden of her own, one that had ultimately driven her away. As he sat there, his mind raced with possibilities. If Jenna had known the truth, then someone else did too, the twins' biological father. Who was he? Did he know about Layla and Maya? Did he care? And what role had he played in Jenna's decision to leave? David couldn't let the questions go unanswered. He needed to understand the full story, not just for himself, but for the girls. They deserved to know where they came from, even if the truth was messy and painful. The next day, David began his search for Jenna. He hadn't heard from her since she left, and her social media accounts had been inactive for years. He reached out to mutual friends, but no one had seen or spoken to her. It was as if she had vanished. The lack of answers only fueled his determination. He needed to find her, not to confront her with anger, but to seek the truth, for the twins, for himself, and maybe even for Jenna, who had clearly been struggling with her own demons. In the meantime, life with Layla and Maya carried on. David did his best to shield them from the turmoil he felt inside, pouring his energy into being the father they needed. He took them to the park, read them bedtime stories, and helped them with their homework, all while the questions about their past simmered beneath the surface. One afternoon, as the girls played in the backyard, David received a call from an old friend of Jenna's. It was someone he hadn't spoken to in years, someone who had drifted away when Jenna left. The timing felt almost too perfect. "I heard you were looking for Jenna," the voice on the other end said hesitantly. David's heart raced. "Yes, I am. Do you know where she is?" There was a pause before the friend replied. "I don't know exactly, but the last I heard, she was living in a small town upstate. She wanted to start fresh, get away from everything." "Do you know why she left?" David asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Another pause. I think she was scared. There was someone from her past who came back into her life. She didn't say much, but it seemed serious. She was always looking over her shoulder, like she was afraid of being found." The words sent a chill down David's spine. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but the picture they formed was far from clear. Who was this person from Jenna's past, and what role did they play in her decision to leave? After hanging up the phone, David felt a renewed sense of urgency. He needed to find Jenna and uncover the truth, no matter how complicated or painful it might be. He couldn't change the past, but he could confront it, for himself, for Jenna, and most importantly, for Layla and Maya. That night, as the twins slept soundly in their room, David sat alone with his thoughts. He thought about the journey that lay ahead, the questions that still needed answers, and the secrets waiting to be unearthed. He didn't know where the path would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to protect the girls and give them the future they deserved, even if it meant facing truths that would change everything. And so, with a heavy heart and a determined spirit, David prepared to step into the unknown, ready to uncover the story behind the life he thought he knew. Little did he know, the answers he sought would bring revelations far more shocking than he could ever imagine. David's mind was restless, filled with questions he couldn't push aside. Every day felt like a battle between the life he had built with Layla and Maya and the uncertainty that Jenna's absence and the DNA results had unleashed. He had always thought of himself as a rational man, someone who could handle challenges with calm and clarity. But now his emotions swirled in ways that left him feeling unmoored. The small town Jenna had supposedly moved to was nearly 4 hours away. It wasn't much to go on, but it was the only lead David had. One crisp Saturday morning, after settling the twins with his neighbor, Mrs. Turner, a kind woman who treated them like her own grandchildren, he set off on the road. The drive was quiet, the hum of the engine bending with the thoughts racing through his head. He tried to imagine what he would say to Jenna if he found her. Would she even talk to him? Or had she buried her secrets too deep to ever face them again? When he arrived in the town, it felt like a place where time had slowed down. Quaint shops lined the streets, and the people seemed to move at a pace far removed from the hustle of city life. David stopped at a small cafe, hoping someone might recognize Jenna's name or face. "Excuse me," he asked the barista, holding out an old photo of Jenna he had brought along. "Have you seen her around? Her name's Jenna Carter, or it might be something different now." The young woman squinted at the picture, her brow furrowed. "She looks familiar. I think she might have come in a few times. Quiet, kept to herself. But I haven't seen her in a while. Maybe you should try the library or the community center. A lot of newcomers go there. Thanking her, David followed the lead. The library turned up nothing, but at the community center he struck gold. A middle-aged woman who worked there recognized Jenna immediately. She volunteered here for a while, helping with kids' programs, the woman said. Lovely girl, but she always seemed distant, like she was carrying a heavy burden. She stopped coming a few months ago, though. No one's seen her since. David's heart sank. It felt like Jenna was always just out of reach, slipping through his fingers every time he got close. But as he turned to leave, the woman hesitated. You know, she added, there was a man who used to visit her here. Tall, dark-haired. He came by a few times asking for her. And whenever she saw him, she looked scared, like she wanted to run but couldn't. The words sent a chill down David's spine. Who was this man? And what had he done to make Jenna so afraid? As he drove back home that evening, the pieces of the puzzle began to shift in his mind. It wasn't just about the twins or the DNA test anymore. There was something bigger at play, something Jenna had been running from. And whatever it was, David had a sinking feeling that it wasn't over. At home, life with the twins carried on as usual, but David couldn't shake the unease that followed him. Layla and Maya were growing fast, their bond as strong as ever. They brought light and laughter into his days, even as the shadow of uncertainty lingered. He knew that whatever he uncovered about their past, his love for them wouldn't change. They were his daughters in every way that mattered, but they still deserved the truth. One evening, as he read them a bedtime story, Layla asked a question that caught him off guard. Daddy, where's Mommy? David's throat tightened. It wasn't the first time they had asked about Jenna, but now, with everything he had learned, the question felt heavier. She's not here right now, he said carefully, but she loves you very much. Maya looked up at him with her big curious eyes. Will we ever see her again? David hesitated, then kissed their foreheads. I hope so, he said softly. After they fell asleep, David sat alone, replaying their words in his mind. He thought about how much Jenna had missed. The first steps, the first words, the little milestones that made parenthood so rewarding. No matter what she had done, she was still their mother. And despite everything, David wanted her to be a part of their lives again. The next day, he decided to dig deeper. If Jenna was running from something, or someone, he needed to know who. He went back through her journal, looking for clues. Among the entries, one name appeared more than once. Aaron. Aaron, the name meant nothing to David, but it seemed significant to Jenna. One entry stood out. Aaron found me again today. He said he just wants to talk, but I don't believe him. He always wants more, and I can't give it to him. I need to protect the girls. They're the only thing that matters now. I can't let him take them from me. David's stomach churned as he read the words. Who was Aaron? And what did he want with Jenna and the twins? He decided to search for any information he could find on Aaron. After hours of digging online, he came across a news article from several years ago. It mentioned a man named Aaron Daniels who had been arrested for fraud and domestic disputes, but had avoided serious jail time due to lack of evidence. The photo in the article matched the description David had heard from the woman at the community center. It was him. David was certain of it. Now the pieces were starting to form a clearer picture. Jenna had been running from Aaron, trying to protect herself and the twins. But if Aaron had found her once, there was a chance he could find her again. Or worse, come after Layla and Maya. The thought sent a wave of fear through David. He had to protect the girls, no matter what, but he also needed to find Jenna and get the full story. She was the only one who could fill in the gaps and explain why Aaron was such a threat. As David sat in the quiet of his living room that night, he felt the weight of the choices ahead. The answers he sought were closer than ever, but they came with risks he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Yet, as he looked at the twins sleeping peacefully, he knew he didn't have a choice. He had to keep going, no matter how difficult or dangerous the journey became. Because the truth wasn't just about uncovering the past. It was about securing the future for the two little girls who were still in his heart. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of Jenna's past, the answers were waiting to be found. But so was the danger.